And I didn't even know I was asking this question, but I was asking the question, what is money? And where do I put my resources, and how do I optimize what I have? We are going to get in a deflationary cycle on a Bitcoin standard, and that your Bitcoin is going to gain in power and value. Your purchasing power will go up, your time preference will go down, and you'll be able to live a better life. And you'll probably be sitting on a stack that will fund yourself, your kids, your grandkids.
All right, Daren Epstein, welcome to Bitcoin for Millennials.
Thank you very much, Bram. Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat. I think we got in touch when I tweeted once that someone canceled, and you replied, and I think you said something like, "I'm a 30-year DoD veteran, and I have some stories to tell." So here we are.
Yeah.
And I'm a Bitcoiner, I think.
And yeah.
Yeah. So I was thinking, where should we start? But I think as someone who has been active in the Department of Defense, I think at the forefront of defending, the American liberties, etc. How do you define liberty and freedom in a modern context, and how is that evolving?
Well, what does liberty mean to individual people? And right now, when I think, and you have your own perspectives, being in the Netherlands, when people look at the United States today, does the United States project this idea of a land that was established on freedom, right? And it's trying to do good in the world by using its enormous capacity to spread liberty to, let's say, the Middle East, let's say to Ukraine. Is that what the deal is? Or is it big government gone awry, using taxpayer money, using the money printer, right? Using fiat money to spread its own agenda in order to attain as much power as possible. And a guy who really talks a lot about this is Professor John Mearsheimer from the University of Chicago. And he wrote a book called The Tragedy of Great Power Politics. And he's often on a great podcast, Judge Napolitano. And he talks about how, now he's more of a realist, right? Meaning that all countries try to assume as much power as they can within their own systems, and they develop militaries to develop that power. And sometimes that results in great power rivalry, but a lot of times that has nothing to do with liberty. So when the United States was established in let's say 1775, when the Revolutionary War began, but really in 1764 was when the colonists really started getting disaffected with the British. They took the ideas of the British Enlightenment, or the Enlightenment in general, and in particular John Locke's Second Treatise of Government, and they discussed this idea of natural rights. So the simplest way that I define liberty, and these are universal, it's not just as an American, and that's the mistake that Americans make. The Constitution gives me this right. The Constitution gives me that. And we'll talk about how the Constitution was the counter-revolution. The Declaration of Independence was the revolution. So I look at liberty as emanating from the natural rights of man. And that means we have the right to free speech. Whether you're a German, whether you're a French, it doesn't matter what your government practices, but we all have those rights. And as we'll get into it later in the discussion, because the title of your podcast is Bitcoin for Millennials. Bitcoin is for everybody. And I specifically came on when you and I touch base, was because I'm a boomer. And I think these are universal principles. And when I realized the potential for Bitcoin, I think all of us recognizes that the potential for Bitcoin gives us this potential to operate individually or sovereignly, like in the sovereign individual. Former Secretary of State John Kerry, former Senator John Kerry, recently talked about amending the First Amendment because social media allowed too much free speech, basically. So how does somebody like that, and we know, because he just doesn't prize this idea of liberty, and that's an insight. People just don't study American history. That's an insight to what some of the founders thought. Some of the people who were in favor of the Constitution, the Federalists, they were the oligarchs. They were the elite. They were afraid of the rabble who fought in the Revolution. They were afraid of the Thomas Paines, the rabble rousers, the Patrick Henrys. And so throughout history, you've always had this challenge between liberty and the state. So when I talk about liberty, I favor individual liberty, natural rights, and Bitcoin thankfully, is the first money in history to underwrite that probability for us going forward in the future.
What I like about doing the podcast is that it gives me new insights as to how I think about Bitcoin. So from my perspective, right, as you talk about the Constitution, it's kind of like, it's more a philosophy than a set of rules, right? Like if you think about, this freedom of man, everyone is equal, right? That means despite skin color, whatever you say and all these, so everyone is equal, right? And we structure that in a framework. So it's a philosophy packaged, and then rules come out of that, basically, or people are in charge of setting certain rules. Currently, yes, we are at the point where John Kerry says, well, maybe we should rethink this free speech rule. That shows you kind of how far away we are from this initial philosophy. And with Bitcoin, I think it's a total 180, right? It's a set of rules that anyone can adopt. Anyone is free to adopt these rules. And from the adoption of these rules, this philosophy emerges. And so it's kind of like the other way around. And I think that's just my short reflection on what you just said. I think I come across this a lot, that Bitcoin is the total opposite of the paradigm that we live in, but it feels like it's more naturally aligned to what humans, I want to say, are able to work with, right? So we can start with a philosophy and then make rules, but we are all corruptible in some sense. If we get the possibility to corrupt a rule system to benefit ourselves, this is one of my biggest insights, I think, into Bitcoin. Like from a distance, you would say, "Oh, I would never do that. I'm a righteous person, this and that." But if you're in that position, you would definitely do that in some way, shape, or form if you are part of the system, right? But by corrupting the rules, you eventually also corrupt the philosophy, because the philosophy gets abstracted or obfuscated, right? Or, like people change the history literally, right? And with Bitcoin, the starting rules are the starting rules, and they will stay the starting rules, right? Every 10 minutes, we still check, are the rules still there? So the philosophy is developed based on a set of rules that never changes. And I think that's just really interesting. And I was wondering what you think of that. And also I want to add for the people who hear you share all these history things, within your career in the Department of Defense, you have studied, history, military strategy, etc., for years, right? So you know your stuff.
Maybe my wife might disagree with that. I mean, it's also, and this is one of the things, and and you'll see it if we make the mistake of going to my Twitter stream, which is I'm not all Bitcoin there. I'm mostly politics, and I'm pretty aggressive. And I'm trying to get over that. But it's I'm more of an autodidact, and I knew when I went through traditional public schooling, and when I was younger, I went through probably grade school in the 70s, and our high school, I know you have different system, gymnasium and those types of things. But the education was pro-American, but I think it was a lot better. And we were exposed to things that weren't directly the directive of the state. I think now we've descended into something that's a lot less reliable. But I personally believe there's also, I was an Army officer, I was a leader, and we have all sorts of sayings, right? And a lot of my experiences in the military were very good, and I learned a lot of lessons. I am absolutely against a large standing army, and I'm against having a military in general. But that's based on philosophy. And it's one of those things where you have tenets like anything that you don't check on can go wrong, right? You have to personally be involved. You have to have agency, right? So we're doing this podcast because last time we set a date and I failed because I thought I had my system set up and I QC'd it to a point, but I totally boomerized you. And that set you, and that could have been the deal breaker, but I appreciate your kindness in saying, okay, I'll take a chance that this guy will fix it again. So afterwards I've had this thing set up, so to make sure. But if you say now, I'm not saying don't trust people. I'm not saying, micromanage. I'm not saying that at all, because once you validate a system, right. And that's where the 100 hours of Bitcoin comes in. And you can say 100. Of course, you and I, and you more so than I, do thousands of hours, because once you discover Bitcoin, you can't get it out of your mind.
Are you looking to save in Bitcoin for your retirement? Meet OnRamp, the leader in Bitcoin financial services. OnRamp has just launched the industry's first Bitcoin IRA with multi-institution custody. That means unparalleled support, transparency, and peace of mind for your retirement. With OnRamp, you can verify your assets directly on-chain and protect them with the support of 3 independent institutions, eliminating the risks of a single point of failure. Are you ready to take control of your Bitcoin retirement? Visit the link below or go to onrampbitcoin.com to learn more about OnRamp's Bitcoin IRA.
There are certain things
because it's so, again, like contradictory to what you've learned. And so it kind of like starts as this exploration into what is this thing theoretically, like how does this work? And then from that you evolve to a point where you think like, this thing it's totally clear to me how it works and what the effect on the incentives are for humans, etc., etc. Oh, how does the thing work that was taught to me in school? Or was I actually taught something, right? And then you see this other side, right? I think that is, I don't know if is that the red pill or whatever, but it's just like it you just study a subject and then you realize that all the other stuff that you were taught is wrong. Yeah, then like how can you go back? You know, and I think it's a second order effect of just studying this subject. That is
it is because it reminds me of that scene in the second Star Wars where they're looking for Darth Vader's looking for the generators on the Hoth system, to find out where the rebel base is. And they bring this up on the screen, and it's you see the generators there, and Darth Vader goes, "That's it." And then the military guy's like, "Well, Lord Vader, there are so many systems in the, and he's like, "That's it. Set a course for there." He knows. When you see Bitcoin, it's kind of like that, because you get into it, and however, the startling thing to me is you go down that road, you're discovering every aspect of it, and then you really ask the question, what is money?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. It leads you, but that seems like a first grade question. It seems like something you learn when you're 6.
But that's why it's so revealing.
It is.
That's why it's so confrontational when you get to that point. Yeah, what is actually money? What am I exchanging my finite time and energy for? No one ever taught me.
Yeah, and while you're going through that, right, it's like being outside somewhere and somebody runs by naked, and you, mommy, look, there's a naked man, and no one else sees the naked man, but you see it.
Yeah, but I think it's the example eventually is like if someone is anti-Bitcoin, and I understand Bitcoin, then I'm saying, but what are you? You are pro what?
That's right.
You are pro what? And they don't have an answer. Well, they have an answer, but they don't understand why. If you dig deeper, if you ask questions like, okay, why is 2% inflation good? Or why is infinite creation of money good? Or whatever. Why is the bill with the 10 on it worth less than the one with the 100 on it? Like, what does that? Yeah, and for some people, and I don't know what the trait is that curiosity, honesty, self-reflection, I have no clue, but in some people it triggers something and they are like, damn, he's right, I don't know what I'm talking about. And in other people it triggers this
resentment,
emotional response, like no like that is too confrontational for me. And I get it, because it's not a nice realization. I mean, I was like 30 when I realized this, and I don't know, I think that's pretty rough, to be honest.
It is. And I went through this, and I think everybody kind of goes through these stages of Bitcoin wonderment. And when I was still working for DOD, I remember I was at my desk one day, and I was kind of in my more confrontational phase, right? This probably would have been around 2021, 2022. I had basically converted to being a Bitcoin maxi. I was reading everything I could get my hands on. I took the Sailor.org Bitcoin for Everyone, Stefan Livera, and then I mentioned something about Bitcoin, and there was a passerby, an army major, and West Point guy, and I can talk about those people. They're the indoctrinated of the indoctrinated. And so I mentioned, I asked them, hey, did you, ever look into Bitcoin? Did you ever think of when I say buy some and put it aside, I'm talking $100 of fiat. That's all. I'm not telling anybody to leverage or sell their home. I'm just saying, hey, put around $100. If you can wait a cycle and then compare it to everything else and make your own decision. Well, I've looked into Bitcoin. Okay, well, here we go. Well, how did you look into Bitcoin? Well, I've read about it. Okay, well, what have you read? Blank. And it's such resentment that people will lie, right? Because I'll ask them, did you read the Bitcoin Standard? Did you read the bullish case for Bitcoin? Did you read the Fiat Standard? Did you? And so I'm not trying to catch anybody out, but I was a lot more aggressive back than I am right now. But it's a strange thing with Bitcoin where people will not. I think it's because they have such ignorance. I think it's because no one really knows what the answer to the question, what is money? It seems like a basic question.
Mm-hmm.
But no one.
Like the question. Yes.
It's
what Robert Breedlove says, right? It's the defining question.
It is the defining question. And how much time, his whole Sailor series, how long is that?
Yes, very long. Yeah, a few hours. But isn't it because, I'm thinking, I think I got lucky in a sense, but when I was younger, I was a private driver for some time. And it's there where I learned not only like talk when someone talks to you, right? But also about like, what can you talk about? Like you can show interest in something, but the line between showing interest and having or posing a very flawed opinion when you don't know what you're talking about against someone that actually knows, that's a very thin line. And I think that made me humble in a sense that I feel like I need to get more information from someone or gather it myself, right, before I can shape this opinion. And I think with like war or the EU, NATO, whatever, like everyone has an idea around that because they know it influences them, but it feels very far away. And I think the topic of money is, although war and geopolitical strategies, etc., are probably over the long term way more impactful on your personal life, right? But money you use every day. So once someone comes by and says, this thing you're using every day, either using or spending time and energy to gather it, your whole idea about that is wrong, And I think that hits way more home because it's every day. And for most people, a third of the day that they are, doing something to gather this or either spend this. And if you say, your idea about that is wrong, it's just too much. And I think it's also not the way, of course, to say, plain, you are wrong. But just that confrontation is just very big in a sense. It's how bad would it be that I realize that I'm wrong about this thing that I spend my energy on every day. It's just not a nice realization. It's hard. Yeah.
It is hard. And look, we are the one percenters. And that's why, like I said, I don't use the term Bitcoin community because I think we're all individuals in this space and we have one thing in common, which is Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But we're the one percenters in that you've chosen to do something by having a podcast about Bitcoin, which the average person isn't going to do. I was eventually forced out of DOD over some disagreements, investigations, that type of stuff based on my opinions, my reluctance to engage in medical experiments. And whenever you kind of go down that path, and I also made the same decision about my children, to homeschool them. And once you do, and once you start to look into the ideas of what and you and I had talked about this offline, maybe when you began the podcast, you kind of have imposter syndrome in a way. And then, now you're going to be on, a big podcast coming up and you're a significant person in the space who people listen to, who get informed by. You have a large audience and people like what you do. but that takes risk. And a lot of people don't like people who take risk. They don't like the different person. And that's kind of the vibe that I got when I decided I was going to homeschool the kids, when I decided I'm a kettlebell instructor. So I fit the profile of, excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold, the carnivore. I'm into exercise, homeschool the kids, into Bitcoin. I'm into taking charge of our own life, and something that, what Seb talks about. And as I go through that space, you start to realize that, and it's not easy because I had differences, within the family on who wanted to do what type of education. Kids were on board. My wife's Japanese, so very conservative. They kind of like to feel more comfortable having kids in school. But once you kind of get over that first or second year and you start to realize, what are my kids doing for homeschool? I watched your show with Seb Bunny the other day with my 16-year-old. It's virtually like him reading The Hidden Cost of Money, which I have on his. So next year, going into this academic year, he's going to take a business course. He's going to take a Western civilization course, and then we're going to see what Bitcoin. He sits in with me when I do, when I engage with my kind of Bitcoin advisor team. And he'll read The Hidden Cost of Money this year. Last year, he was reading the Bitcoin Standard in Japanese because he's fluent in English and Japanese. And when I look at that from a macro level, and we watch, Judge Napolitano, we talk about these ideas of individual freedom and liberty. My goal for him is to, and for both kids, is to be entrepreneurs, set up their own business. It's going to university these days. When I went, there was meaning to it. There's no meaning to it now. And I'm making sure that I got a good classical education. So they enjoy Shakespeare. They enjoy classical music. They enjoy all these things because we're making this environment. If they go to public school, if they do what the state wants them to do, that for the most part, their time's going to be wasted. And their heads are going to be filled with agenda-laden politics. That's not healthy. And if they develop the understanding to be able to think critically, and Bitcoin is a core, and that's important. And so, and they do jujitsu. We just went to a tournament in Nagoya this weekend. We took the bullet train to go down there. So all of these things are experiences that people who are developing, young people are developing. They're going to be able to develop a framework in the future, so that I have great hope for the kids in the next 5-10 years or so, if you're in a place where you can educate yourself and the state doesn't intervene. And Bitcoin is an essential component of that. In the future, as opportunities develop, you're going to be able to use Bitcoin as an opportunity to develop cash flow. Now, I know that's not what Seb Bunny would. I don't think he would disagree, but certainly I agree with Seb, and you and I had talked about it. I agree that we are going to get in a deflationary cycle on a Bitcoin standard, and that your Bitcoin is going to gain in power and value, and you're going to be able to, your purchasing power will go up, your time preference will go down, and you'll be able to live a better life. And you'll probably be sitting on a stack that will fund yourself, your kids, your grandkids. That's all well and good. Yeah. But there are also going to be other opportunities out there, just like being an investor, where as banks start to get into this game, as we have the ETFs have come out, there are going to be more traditional financial approaches to being able to develop a revenue stream off of Bitcoin. And that may be enough to fund someone's lifestyle while they pursue a hobby or try to set up their own business.
Yeah. How do you, I think you touched upon that in the beginning, but you talked about personal responsibility, in this connection to the pursuit of your own freedom and liberty. How do you look at that? But also, how does that change with Bitcoin? And I'll share my idea. So I think it's really hard to figure out for most people. Some people really know young when they're young, right? Like, what am I here to do? What am I here to contribute, right? Like, what should I spend my finite time and energy on that is valuable enough for myself and for other people, right? So whatever job or venture, whatever you want to do. I think that is really hard to figure out. And I feel that on a Bitcoin standard, and that is probably very far away, but saving in Bitcoin can already get you to that point to some degree. It gives you time. It gives you time to figure something out, right? And if it's option A that you're pursuing, and after a year you are like, this is not for me, like, and when you're honest about that, right? Like, I really tried, it's not for me, or I'm not good enough, or whatever, I would say that's a good thing. But in the current with the current use of fiat money, over time, your savings have been devalued, right? And so you actually go backwards. You don't go forward. And with Bitcoin, if you save and your purchasing power stays the same or actually increases, you can have more time to figure out, is option B the thing that I should go for? That's kind of how I look at that. But I wonder about your thoughts.
I 100% couldn't agree more. That's exactly right. And I don't think whether you're in your 30s or I'll be 60 in a couple weeks. And if you're the type of person like you and I were talking about, if you're the person that sees the naked person running and you're self-aware, then you understand it. And so, like I said, when my time started running out at DOD, and look, DOD was a good gig because I tell my kids I was a fiat slave and I was drawing more out of the system than I was putting into the system. So people can blame it on boomers. Well, boomers did all this, bad stuff in the economy. And I'm not going to disagree with that. But that was the game at the time. And if I had just taken that money and saved, I wouldn't have been able to walk away when I walked away. But what I did was I've been an investor. Like I said, I came to Bitcoin as an investor. So I was investing probably starting around 1991, 1992. I would have been a lieutenant in Germany, and I started putting money into an IRA, and then I started putting money aside. Then I went into Fidelity mutual funds. Then I read Peter Lynch, Ben Graham, and Warren Buffett, and I really throughout my military career, my DoD career, I was working to be an investor. That was my cash flow. And when I retired from the Army, you get an Army pension, and I worked as a Navy civilian. My entire Army pension went to investing. And I tell people this story all the time. I looked at investing almost just like Bitcoin, in that it started to dawn on me that I don't want to have a basket of funds, right? Because the S&P 500 is shitcoins. I didn't know it at the time, but now you can certainly play the S&P 500. I got it. But what I started to understand is I'm going to put my resources into Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and MasterCard, because I kind of had this theory. And I did that in 2006, 2007, 2008 financial crisis. Everybody panics. They get out. What do? I still believed in the core. I had my core beliefs. So I bought when everything was on sale. And I bought until it was painful. I invested until it was painful. Because I knew at some time, I didn't know anything about time preference, but I was trying to calibrate it so that when something occurred, I could walk away. And then, over the years, I put down enough to save for a house, or at least a down payment. We live here in Japan, housing is expensive. Now, like you said, personal responsibility, taking care of every aspect of your life. I'll add that in there, right? Pay attention to the details. I live in Japan. What's the biggest threat in Japan? Earthquakes and typhoons. So the house that I'm in right now is basically earthquake proof and typhoon proof. So it's called a Hebel house. They're miracles. It's all steel. Excuse me. It's all steel girders. And because that's a kind of a military thing where your base of operations has to be secure, right? And we bought the house around 2019. So I got out of equities, got heavy into cash, avoided the COVID meltdown. And then after that March of 2020, I think 2019 was when I read the Bitcoin Standard. So I'm class of 2020, just like Michael Saylor. And I was a gold bug at the time. I was looking for some sort of life raft because I knew after COVID that, watching us go through that whole meltdown, I was very uncomfortable. And I didn't even know I was asking this question, but I was asking the question, what is money? And where do I put my resources, and how do I optimize what I have? And I went through a really brief shitcoin period, had some Ethereum. And the more and more I got into Bitcoin, I read the white paper. I thought, oh my God, this is it. And I felt the same way that I felt about Amazon and Apple and MasterCard and Netflix, but more so. Yeah. And this is digital gold. And then you started asking all those questions like Safe does, right? When you go through that, well, why is it better than gold? I can't transport gold, right? I don't even know if the gold is gold. When I had gold, it was stored in a vault in Switzerland. How do I know it's even there?
Question: if you have your Bitcoin in self-custody, where are you keeping your Bitcoin seed words? For me, there's only one way, and it's backing up my seed phrase with stamp seed. It's a single durable plate without any parts or materials. Stamp your words into solid titanium, which is fire-resistant, water-resistant, and built to last. Unlike etching or engraving, stamp seed's patented tools help you to deeply stamp every letter for permanent readability, making it easy for you to protect your generational wealth. Don't risk losing your seed phrase on paper. Get a stamp seed plate for unmatched protection. You can use code BRAM, that's BRAM, for 15% off at stampseed.com.
Yeah.
I can't. And so,
yeah.
and I'll
when
jump
you sell your certificates, what do you sell?
What does that mean?
Who proves that? Yeah. Exactly.
What is that? And I'll tell you, and this is kind of jumping ahead in a way, but when I started taking personal custody of my coins, when I set up the node, I got emotional. It was an emotional, when I started seeing, I'll call it the time chain in honor of Jack Mahler's, not the blockchain. But when I saw that layout, something emotional happened. And I was like, there it is. It's being built out, and I'm watching it build out, and I'm an owner in that. And by running the node, I'm securing the network.
I love that.
Right. Yeah. And so like you said, how do you take personal responsibility? And that's just like homeschooling. It's just like doing your own research. It's just like deciding what you're going to eat. It's just like deciding how you're going to work out, who you're going to marry, what relationships you're going to have, what type of house you're going to build. We're all adding to the network. And then when you interact with people like you and Seb Bunny, it just happens that all the people that really see it for what it is are all great people. And I'm willing to call that a community. Maybe there's a community within the community, but the other problem is, there's such a small group of people that see it. And
I love what you said. So 2020, so you were like 55-ish. Like that's right. When you saw it, and right. As someone who had been investing for 15 years, that's only when you saw it. And I think that's just a great illustration of how, what the challenge is that we have, right? Like, I mean, we are talking about this. Some people are listening to this that have been listening for a while. Maybe some people discover this and are new, right? Like everyone gets into learning about this, at a certain point. But I think it's good to emphasize that it's not easy. It's really hard. Like we are trying to deprogram ourselves of a program that we weren't even aware of, that we were programmed in that way, and so it's just a hard thing. And I think that's okay. Like it's a good thing to realize that, like, give yourself some time, right? Like, or the love that you deserve to, give yourself that time. You don't have to figure it out. You are still early, all these things, right? But I love that you can quickly jump to this angle. I don't know if it's spiritual or whatever, but it does something to yourself, even when you're studying Bitcoin, even when you're not profiting from it in whatever way, either the price goes up or you have more time or whatever. But just the studying, at least for me, is already like a rewarding thing, right? Like the conversations like this are rewarding to me, and that is already enough, I would say. How do we show people how, I want to say, bad it is in some way, like how bad the debasement of the currency impacts our freedom, but also the societal structures. I mean, we could start with, Bitcoin Alliance, all positive incentives, etc. But I think that's too much. What is your basic explanation for the effect of debasing a currency on your personal freedom and societal structure?
Well, and that's that's the challenge. Where the rubber meets the road. Where do you take academics and then turn them into action, right? And that, I think that's why so many Bitcoiners are Austrians, because they rely on Ludwig von Mises, and I'm always writing on a lot of my posts on X, human action. You have to allow humans to act. So there's the tragedy that's going on in the East Coast of the United States right now in the wake of the hurricane. The federal government is failing, right? And I, as much as I hate to see that, I think it's going to deliver this message to some people that may make the mistake that the federal government works for them. Federal government doesn't work for them. The federal government works for the federal government. Those people are interested in their own careers. So they're denying free citizens access who have helicopters and trucks and all this stuff into this area, trying to take care of the rescue situation themselves. And what people will eventually learn is, and this is why I always say no government, right? Nullification, secession. I don't want there to be a United States. I want there to be separate states, independent states, the way it was meant, excuse me, the way it was meant to be by the founders, and with a loose affiliation under the Articles of Confederation. So what people are starting to learn, and this is maybe the first time this has happened because of social media, I'm watching people and I'm connecting people on social media that I know who have military experience, who helicopter pilots, truckers, the outpouring of support. Look, the American people are good people. Their government sucks. And they are responding, reaching out to folks. There are people that are setting up ham networks. They know how to do this. And I think at some point, with showing what government is incapable of doing and reintroducing this idea that the power to make change rests with the people. I even saw, and I was going to try to donate to it, but I just didn't have time. There are some nodes that are using Bitcoin to finance their operations. It may be Shane Hazel's group, Bitcoin Veterans. And Bitcoin Veterans is another group of people that they have capabilities, military capabilities. Most of these people are anti-war. They've been downrange. They've been in countries that they had no business in being, had no business being in, trying to execute plans from the elite leaders and oligarchs based on the fiat system. When really what we want to do is have our own small communities in a local area, so that if you live down the street from me and you knocked on my door and said, "Hey, I've got to go to a meeting. Can you watch my kid?" We've built up that level of trust where I'll do it. And I'm not going to say, yeah, for $500. I'm going to say, yeah, you go over here. What do you want me to teach him something? Or I'll do it for free. Why? Because I'm on a Bitcoin standard. I don't need the $500, right? If this thing is going to go, and that's part of it. If this thing is going to go where we think it's going to go, if the kid stays long enough, I'll build him a house, right? And we're going to be able to fill out these networks on a Bitcoin standard. We're going to have communications nodes. We're going to be able to build better houses in better areas. It's all going to get better, but those networks have to form. And it's not going to be, hey, if Trump were president, this wouldn't have happened, right? Or Kamala's FEMA is failing us. That's what's all over X. It doesn't matter who's in charge, right? And so it's going to take a lot of work to get there. But I believe, Corona, the COVID thing, turned a lot of people into homeschoolers because they saw what was happening online in their schools, and they realized they could do a better job than that. Yeah. So if the question is, how do we orange pill other people? How do we get move quicker to a Bitcoin standard? How do we get freedom and liberty? Because it's all tied. You can call it Bitcoin. Who was it? I think it was you or somebody. I've heard other people say Bitcoin is free speech. I know Nico was talking about it the other day. And there's an excellent book by Professor Jonathan Turley I think he's at the University of Chicago, called The Essential Right. And it's about free speech. I'll send you a link to a speech that he gave recently.
Thanks.
I'm an emotional guy, and it kind of made me tear up because he talks about natural rights. And now he knows nothing about Bitcoin, but he knows this essential right. He knows free speech is paramount, right? You and I, we don't know each other. We met each other through social media. We communicated through your second language, my first, through texting. And then eventually we talked and we communicated. We found out we had some ideas in common. And now we're having a fairly, I think, complex conversation about something that, I wouldn't have this conversation with 99% of the people that I know. Sorry, Nicole. And so it's going to be a long road, and we're all going to have a part to play in it, like you are, educating, especially millennials, but everybody involved in the Bitcoin space. And it's just going to take more and more of us talking about it. And then when we see the opportunity, injecting into a situation, this idea that if we had individual liberty, if we didn't rely on big government, if we didn't rely on the printing press, because that's why FEMA failed, because they got money from the printing press and they gave it all to, they say, foreigners. Sorry. Terrible cold. But
or whatever, right? But now they're saying
or whatever
the money is finished.
The money isn't there.
Yeah.
And it's either in Ukraine or wherever. But the thing is that the lesson is it's just like fractional reserve banking. Your money isn't sitting in the bank.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't exist. Well, except for your Bitcoin.
Yeah. Again, with this, I feel like Bitcoin is bringing us back to something that we had before, right? Like to this
absolutely
unity. I like the example of, would you let your kids stay with your neighbor? The debasement of fiat currency has made us way more individualistic, while I think a lot of people would argue that the collective is always stronger. Like if you align in a collective way and you have a goal to achieve something, that is obviously stronger than all these tiny individuals that are going in different directions, not really unifying towards a certain goal or aligned with values. And I think like fiat money pulls us away from that collective effort to, I don't want to say do better, improve, progress, whatever, the goal of humans is. And like Bitcoin brings us back to that. And also a good example, yes, we are talking, we just met, we have a totally different upbringing, career, age, geolocation, whatever. But in some way we connect on a basic level. And I think there is already this example of like Balaji Srinivasan talks about, the network state. I think if I find out tomorrow that I have some aggressive form of cancer, then the day after tomorrow, I'm talking to some cancer expert that is also a Bitcoiner. I think that's really possible, right? We are through Bitcoin already getting to this more like, it's not hive mind. It's just, this collective that shares values. It's also cross borders, right? But eventually I think that will also be local, and that you can let your kids stay with another Bitcoiner because you already align on values, and whether that Bitcoiner is brown, black, white, yellow, green, or whatever religion or like all that stuff doesn't matter. And it's funny. This is another insight that you just give me. Like, I feel that is what we are doing. We are getting back to something where we were already, and what was, for example, in America, attempted to be captured in a set of ideas or a philosophy. But there's a system that corrupted that philosophy. And I also think that, I talked about this before, but I don't think like the individual people that work in the system are malicious or bad or whatever. It's just that system, and it's trying to keep itself alive. But you see all these symptoms of social unrest or debasing of culture or whatever that just show that it's not the best that we can do. And I think if you talk about the red pill or figuring it out or like seeing it, whatever that is, I think it's that you realize, hey, this thing that I'm in is not the best that we could ever do. And there is this alternative that once you adopt it, albeit it's still very small, you already see these effects of people eventually coming back together.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And once you start, I think it helps that the fiat system is so broken. And when like what you just said is, I always think, especially being in DOD for so long, I never woke up any morning and thought, hey, I hate the Russians, or the Chinese. I hate those people, They invented the noodles. Who do they think they are? Or the Iranians, right? Or Muslims. And I'm not trying to be super lovey-dovey leftist woke. I have no hatred in my heart for any human being. And in fact, based on what's been going on recently in the Middle East, I've looked, more into Islam. I think we've been lied to to a great, right?
Yeah.
And so,
but I think that's because, sorry to interrupt, but I think that's, I've been coming to this conclusion more and more. I didn't read the Quran or whatever, but I think what Bitcoin shows you is that if the foundation of rules is something that you accept, and once you adopt it, you see these rules permeated into everything and they are unchangeable, it gives you a sense of trust in yourself. Like, I made the correct decision. I studied, I made the correct decision, etc. And in the societal paradigm or whatever that we live in the West, there's so much, talk instead of walk, right? Like, oh yeah, this is why we are better. This is why it's superior. This is why, like, if you have to do that, the base foundational idea is not that good, right? That's just a logical, that's just a rational analysis, at least in my opinion, right? If you constantly have to say, like, oh, this religion is bad or that country sucks. I talked about this, I don't know with who, I think with Brandon Quittem, like, if in India there's a bus that goes off a bridge, right, and 50 people die, there's a news article in my country sometimes, and they say like, oh yeah, the roads in India are notoriously bad or blah, blah, blah. And then I think like, if that would happen in my country, it would not be news in India. And when I read something like that as a news item in my country, I think like, what's the goal? What's the goal of this news item? Is it kind of to say like India is a retarded country and we have better roads or something? Like what are you trying to achieve here? Because obviously it's a horrible accident, but why do I need this information? What's the goal of writing it down like this? And that's what I feel a lot in the West. That's why I'm not doubting it, but I do know that we are definitely not only the good guys as is portrayed for all of my life, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's even more shocking when you find out that you're the bad guys.
Yeah.
And that's the United States.
But you don't want to be the conscious bad guy. That's also not a nice realization, right? Like once you
no, it's terrible.
Yeah.
And I don't have anything against veterans. I don't, and that's why I'm just not Team Trump. I'm not Team Kamala. I don't think we're going to vote our way out of this. We have to have fundamental changes in the society. Bitcoin gives us that opportunity to kind of check out a little bit. And this cycle of violence that we're in, endless wars, endless debt. And the thing is, there's a lot of people that will write on X that, things were so much better in the 90s. Things were so much better in the 80s or the 70s. Look, if you study history, there's always been problems. If you listen to the music in the 60s and the 70s, listen to Marvin Gaye, always listen to What's Going On, that type of stuff. There's been pain and suffering forever. And so, the MAGA, Make America Great Again. I'm not trying to piss anybody off. If I say something like America wasn't ever great, how can you're a traitor. You benefited so much from I got it. But at some point, I'm sorry, we had slavery. I'm starting to break down. We had slavery. We had, organized crime. We had two main world wars, the Korean War, the Vietnam War. We had the Philippine War. We've been at war a long time. We had the Civil War. We tore each other apart. And so, as bad as that may have been in the past, I think what Bitcoin gives us moving forward is a way out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the orange pill gives us the ability to form like you said, I'm against government and I'm for the primacy of the individual, but that doesn't mean I want to live in a cave somewhere. It means I want to trade with people. I want to form free markets, right? Bitcoin is a communicative community. It's a community there are people who want to express their ideas to each other. That's what we're doing right here. Complete strangers want to talk about these things. And they're always going to recommend things. If I watch somebody on your podcast, like Seb Bunny, or we listen to Saifedean or Michael Saylor or any of these people, it's like a university education. We're getting educated by people who are really thinking through a new paradigm and what the possibilities are for a better future. And I think, we're at the front of the wave, but we're adopting something that has enormous potential to improve our lives.
Yeah, I agree. So, but how can we? And I like that you talk about this a lot on X, and I think we talked about this before. Like there's this the meme, or right, like the tagline of Bitcoin is, if we change the money, we change the world. I think we touched upon that a bit. Like if we uncorrupt the money and have people adopt a set of rules, then from that, the philosophy will blossom, instead of that fact that, centralized group of people can change the rules or the value of the current money all the time, which messes up our philosophy basically on life, or where do we go, how do we add value, etc. But how do we balance this change the money, change the world, which will take some time, as you also just alluded to? I think a long time, right? I think we will probably only see that after, well, your kids are older than mine, right? But I think after my kids are proper adults, right, that's when we hopefully will see that. But how do we keep that in mind and go there, but still balance like addressing current crises like war and crime and poverty, or the social unrest we see, or just the short-sighted politics, stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a problem. It's a conundrum. And I think it takes constant education. I think it takes constant responsibility. Look, I don't want to make everything about Bitcoin. That's why I'm a little bit uncomfortable with fix the money, fix the world. Although I believe in it, I think it's a step. I think there's a lot of things that we have to do in the future, but it's going to require fixing everything, fixing education, fixing government, fixing military, fixing our idea of what government is. So, I don't know. I think if Bitcoin goes the way we think it's going to go, then that certainly gives us opportunities. Right. So when I was forced out of DOD, and I didn't pick the timeline, but when I made that choice, it was because I knew I had Bitcoin. So I was able to say, once it got uncomfortable, and once I realized I had a legal battle upcoming that was going to cost me thousands of dollars just to get back to a job that I was miserable at, like you said before, when is it? I'm going to be 60. When am I going to take some risk in my life and do something that I want to do, spend more time with my kids? So that's when I came home to my wife and I said, it's not about money. We can do this because I've managed my life in a certain way. And because I have Bitcoin and I think it's going to go where it's going to go, I was able to make the choice to walk away and to improve my life. And that means homeschooling is one thing, but being home, retired with the kids while we homeschool, that's a game changer.
Yeah.
So I can coach my kids in weightlifting. So you're going to have to, I think it's going to require concentric circles where you can only, you can control what you can control. It's that whole stoic thing, right? Yeah. You know that you can eat a certain way. You don't smoke cigarettes. You lift weights or do whatever you want to do. Educate your kids. Read. Like you have the tattoo. That's it. What is it? Always learn.
Learn every day. Yeah.
Learn every day. That's amazing. That's the thing. That's the spirit. And a lot of times that I'm retired, I think, I wasn't productive today. What did I do today? Because the day just goes like that. But I'll sit down. I think, I read some of Seb Bunny's book. I read, a couple of chapters in a Napoleon book. I listened to 5 podcasts. I read with the kids. I watched some podcasts with them. We're taking a step towards a fruitful life. And those are the things that I can control myself. What can I do to make the world a better place? If I were in the United States right now, I'd be assisting in the hurricane relief. But I can't be there, so I can send some money. I can send some Bitcoin, right? I can do what I can within that community to make life better. And I think that's our responsibility to not just talk about throwing around slogans, although it's, good to think through that, but to take human action when it comes to making the world a better place. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I love your reflection. I also love that you said I'm almost 60. When am I going to take risk in my life? I think that's the very conscious thought and moment towards action. But I realized we are already taking risk. Everyone is taking risk all the time, right? Like your choice for a job, your choice on where to live, your choice on who you have a relationship with, your choice to have kids or not, or like all these things. Everything is a risk. The entire life is risk, right? It actually took me a psychedelic experience to realize that life has been given to you, and that is risk by itself, right? And in that ceremony, I realized, you can always check out, right? Like you can always say, I'm gonna quit. But if there's only a slight reaction to that thought that says, no, I don't want to, then you only have one other option, and that is to live with everything that comes with life, which is risk, right? So it's very binary.
That's right.
That made it very, very binary for me. But also made me realize, yes, everything is risk. I spend my time on this. We talked for an hour, could have done something else, but I want to do this, right? And I wanted to ask you, as one of the last 2 questions, like what's the biggest tip to take personal responsibility from your point of view? I think mine would be what I just said. Just realize that everything you choose to do, whether you do it, whether you realize it's conscious or not, is taking a certain risk. And for me, it's been very rewarding to try to be more conscious about it. And for the things that I do, that I don't do in a conscious way, try to get to a point where I realize that I'm not doing it in a conscious way, and then figure out like, okay, how can I change that? And I think it's a slow process, but it's rewarding along the way. But I was wondering about your thoughts there.
Yeah, I I agree 100%. And what I say is, take risk, be a rebel. And I teach my kids that I would rather have them take risk than not. Don't take the traditional path. We homeschool. We've got Bitcoin. They're going to have Bitcoin. They're going to understand it. They're going to understand how to manage their future. And, the reason, we went to like I said before, jiu-jitsu tournament. It takes a lot of guts for little kids to get out there on a mat. There were, thousands of people screaming, Brazilians, crazy. And your kids going out on the mat, fighting for their dear lives, and they had a blast, They get to measure who they are as people. So we do the same thing in weightlifting or skiing, and that's all part of homeschool, right? You control it, your own environment to the extent that you can, and don't be a normie. Don't be normal, right? Learn every day, right? Take that into your heart. Take risk. Ask the girl to the dance. Right. If you don't, what is it? Michael Jordan used to say, there was a Nike advertisement where he talked about how many shots that he missed, how many games that he blew. Mm-hmm. But we just know that he won 6 championships.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So
love that.
Take risk.
Maybe this is the answer already to the last question, that I ask everyone. which is, what is a core belief that you will never let go?
A core belief is individual liberty. People should read the U.S. Declaration of Independence because it's not for Americans, it's for everyone. And so when your government no longer represents you or supports you, you need to take matters into your own hands. And we may be getting to that point, and that's not easy, our founders' sacrifice, but I believe in the core beliefs of liberty, freedom of speech, equality, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's basically it.
Love that, man. Thanks so much for sharing, and I really, really appreciate your time. I thought it was a very deep conversation that we went into now, and I love doing that. I would propose to do a part 2 sometime in the future. That would be great. And
yeah, when I don't have a cold.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think it was great. So thanks again, and we'll be in touch.
All right, Bram. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Take care.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, please like this video if you want to help shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, and subscribe to my channel to stay connected. I hope to see you for a next episode. Bye.